we're gonna code together our very first website, and this is what it's gonna look like. It's not pretty, it's not perfect, but it does the trick, and it works on both telephones and the web browsers. So it's a basic coin flipping app where when you click this, you get heads or tails at random. And that's it. Nice and simple. And on top of that, we'll even add a little link to something called GitHub, which we'll talk about in a bit, because in the end, we're going to use GitHub to actually deploy the website completely for free. And we're going to do that in one video. All of this in one video. Visual Studio Code is a fantastic free GUI or IDE, which is an interface for coding. It gets you lots of interesting and fun and useful features, some of which you'll see. The essence of it is the same. So you can download it for Mac, you can download it for Windows and for Linux. So it's great. I'm going to go to the desktop and I'm going to create a file called my first website. Let's put in this camel case this, which is very standard in web design. So we'll then open that file. So we'll go into the desktop and we will open my first website. And here we are. And we'll get cracking. We'll get this welcome page, which we can get rid of. And you'll have this file explorer, which is currently empty. So let's add a new file. And we're going to call it index.html. And so let's create all three files we need. So I'm going to call this next one script.js. And then the last one I'm going to call style.css. And just from the names, you should have an idea of what this should do. Now, these are not necessarily standardized, although it's pretty similar. Index.html is quite standard for the home page of a website. Now, we're creating a single page website, so we won't have multiple pages. But the point of naming it index.html is to let the web browser know that that is the home page. So it'll go looking through your files and find this one first and load this one in first. So when we're talking about web design, we have three main aspects, and they're all described by these three files. HTML files, which contain the actual content, the text, the images, the links, all that stuff is in the HTML. And HTML is what we call a markup language, and it's just a way to go ahead and demonstrate and display data. CSS is cascading style sheets, and that's how you style something from looking boring and gray to looking nice and lovely. Now ours doesn't look the best, but we will work with it. We will do something nice with it to the best of our abilities. And then JavaScript is a programming language, and it is very specifically designed for web stuff. So it allows you to create an interactive experience on the web. So if we go HTML, oh, that's because we're in JavaScript. We're in the wrong one. So let's close these. Don't you get distracted. HTML. This is what comes in as a default. However, if you look for some templates on the add-on plugins, you'll get something like this. Don't worry so much about it. But if I just get rid of this, because although they're important, they're not vital for what we're trying to do here. Let's do what's called indentation, which is very, very important. Indentation allows us to see the different sections of a website. So inside the HTML, we've got the body and the head. And then we've got that indentation for the title and the body. So we're going to call this my coin flip. I think that's what we called it in the original, my coin flip. Yes, it is. Cool. In the body, we're going to want a title. And with titles, you're going to use headings. And there are several types of headings. We got H1 through H6. So let's give a H1. And it looks something like this. I'm not going to explain all the details of these languages, otherwise it'll take ages. But H1 would be the typical title of a website. Now if you see the title here, this stuff doesn't appear on the website, except that it will show up in here in the tab, right? So let's just leave it as it is now. We'll save, and we're going to open this in our web browser. So if I reveal in Finder, it's going to pop up. I'm going to click here, and then I will go here because it opened in my other screen and stick it there. And so this is what we have. So let's go ahead and we're going to add a subtitle. Click the button to flip the coin. Cool. So now we've got a H2, so we've got a title and a subtitle. And now we're going to look at the main body of our content. So we're going to create main tags, and in here is going to be the main part of our website. So we'll create a paragraph text called which called a P tag, and I'm going to throw in some text in here, which is everyone needs to flip a coin, but you can't because cash on your person is a thing of the past. Follow these steps. In fact, I'll even add follow these easy steps because, you know, marketing and stuff. Now let's make a list of instructions. What we're going to do is we're going to create an app where someone clicks on a coin and they get a heads or tails. So I have an OL, and that's ordered lists. There are two types of lists in HTML. In HTML, you've got ordered lists, which are lists with which are numbered, which is what we have here, and unordered lists, ULs, which would be bullet points. Inside of these, you have LIs, which is list items, and we're going to have 3. And in fact, I'll just copy pasta the instructions we have already. I already wrote. So there you go. We place a cursor over the flip button, which we haven't created yet. Click your mouse. If it says heads, then it's heads. Otherwise, it will say it's tails. We're going to create the next section within the main, which is going to be the actual quote-unquote app. We're going to create, first of all, the text where it will tell us whether it's heads or tails, but we'll say click flip to get a coin face, right? So this is what's going to appear by default on the screen. And then underneath, we'll create a button, okay? Button's a special HTML semantics, which tells us that it does something, typically for forms, but we can use it for other things. Great. So now we have almost finished. We're going to add one more thing. We're going to add what's called an anchor tag. Anchor tags are basically links. So I'm going to put check out my GitHub, and we'll cover GitHub in a bit. But GitHub is basically where coders go to host a lot of their code, to share code, to work in teams. And if you want to be a professional developer, you're going to need to use GitHub, or Git at the very least, and GitHub is very popular. In fact, there's a capital H here. But now, as you can see, that doesn't tell us much, right? So if I go here and I refresh this, you see, oh, error. Click T. Cool, let's refresh that. We need to refresh it every time, unless you don't use some add-ons, but we'll cover that in a little bit. And you can see that we've got the button here, and check out my GitHub with nothing there, right? Because nothing to do. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create what's called a href, and that's basically just the link to the website. So I'm going to link my GitHub. You can link yours, you can link anything you want, and then we'll just do it there. So now, if I refresh it, and I click on it, it's going to take me to my GitHub page, Happy Days. But I'd like to keep that page, you know, and it is starting to fall out of convention, but I still like adding a new tab whenever we click on a link for external websites, right? That is sort of my preference, even though it is starting to fall out of fashion. So now I put target _ blank in quotations, and now it opens in a new page, so I still have my tab here. Great. So that's great and all. I'll click flip to get a coin face, but it does nothing, right? Because we haven't told the button to do anything. That's pretty useless for us at the moment. So let's go ahead and start adding some interactivity to this. So we're going to jump into the script.js, and we're going to interact with what's called the DOM, which is basically the way we do things. Now I'm going to create a shortcut, which I've already done here. And let me just explain this. You write this out manually. You won't have this shortcut because that's one I've created. I've created what's called an anonymous function in JavaScript. We won't go into too much detail with these things. Just copy along, right? This is not a tutorial on how to use JavaScript. It's just a tutorial to get your first website going. But essentially, this will automatically run when we load the page. And that means that we will automatically have code working. So first things first, we should we need to be able to interact with this, but we need to be able to somehow identify what we want to interact with. So let's go ahead and give these what are called IDs. So we're going to give this an ID, and we're going to give this another ID. And so IDs will help us select these things and allow us to interact with them. So first of all, let's give this the coin, right? Because this is going to be the coin. It's going to give us heads or it's going to give us tails. And then here, we're going to give it the ID of flip, the action of flipping. The button's creating an action, and that action is to flip. So I've given them IDs of coin and flip, which is great enough, but we need to somehow select them. So I'm going to declare what are called variables. We do that with a const, which is for constant, and then we do d.get element by ID, and then we're going to open brackets, and then we're going to coin. So all we're doing here is we're creating in this environment something called coin, and we're going to make it so that this this thing here, this p-value, is equals to coin. So in reference to index, script is considering this thing, or more specifically the content inside of it, let's go back, to be coin declared here. And we're going to do the same with flip. So flip equals d.get element by ID, and we're going to call it flip, right? So we called it flip, and we're selecting flip, which is the button, the action, which we gave it an ID of flip. Great. So let's go ahead and do the next step, which is we're going to, basically we need to somehow randomize whether when we click on this, it's going to give us a heads or it's going to give us tails. So the way to do this is we're going to create what's called a function. A function is simply a set of steps that the code does for us. So I'm going to call it face generator because it's going to generate a coin face, and it sounds freaking awesome. So naming conventions are super important. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna select the text content of coin. If you remember, coin is this right here. So we're gonna select the text content of coin, and we're gonna somehow create, make it randomly select heads or tails. We're going to do this using two things. First, some internal JavaScript maths tools that exist, and second, using something called a ternary. Now, don't worry too much about these things. It's just that this is the easiest, fastest way to do it. So we're going to do math.floor, and then in here, we're going to say math.random, and let me explain this in a second, times 2. So just for now, we'll leave it as this, as it is. So what we're saying is math.floor is basically rounding down whatever value you get. So if I were to get 2.6, it would go down to 2. If I were to get 2.1, it would go down to 2 again. So that's what math.floor does. Math.random creates a number between 0 and 1. So we multiply it by 2. So we would get anywhere between 0 and 2. So if this created, for example, 0.4, then times 2, we'd get 0.8. Math floor gives us 0. So if we were to get, say, 1.8 in math.random, we can't get that, 0.8 times 2 would give us 1.6, which math.floor, rounded down, would give us 1. So it's, in essence, this is giving us either 0 or 1. Those are the two only outcomes that we can get from this. So now comes our ternary. I'm going to say, if this is equals to 0, I want a string, let's just say some text, head. If it's not 0, i.e. if it's 1, I want a string called tails. And let's make it more exciting by adding an exclamation mark. Okay, so of course I need to put that 0 there, that would help. Great. So here what we're saying, this is what we call a ternary. This is an expression. An expression in programs will either equate to true or false. So we're saying if this gives us 0, we're going to get heads. If it gives us something other than 0, i.e. 1, it gives us tails. And so the output of this is either going to be heads or tails, which is exactly what we want, at random, which is perfect. So now, when we run this function, the coin is going to, the coin text, the internal value, which is this right here, is going to change to either heads or tails at random. Well, that's great and all, but we actually need to make it work. So let's go ahead and do that. We're going to select the flip, which is the button, remember, the action, and we're going to do something called add event listener, which means it's listening to an action. So the action it's going to listen for is a click, so we're going to click on it. And then face generator, which is this function we just created. And that's it, we're done. Now let's see if that works. It doesn't work. Why? Well, because this file has no way to interact with this file this time. So let's go ahead and make that happen. Remember this head thing? This head thing is actually really important, even if we can't see it on the website. It allows us to add a bunch of different things, including links to other documents. We are getting a script, and the source is going to be, as you can see, pops up automatically, the script.js. And then we close this. It's very important to close it. And so now, when we reload it, this page will be able to interact with this. And this automatically runs, so it's automatically listening to that button. Okay, so now that we have all the content, we have a working app. It's great, but it looks ugly. So let's fix this. First off, I'm going to open something called the DevTools. And if you notice here, I've added these 3 lines, and I've also made some changes to the HTML. And we'll cover this in a bit. Mainly, I've added these back in. So I was never really too understanding what UTF-8 is, but I do understand that it is important. This second one, IE Edge, is for Internet Explorer because some people still use that for some reason. And finally, this is the important one because we're going to deal with the mobile view, and we're going to develop mobile first. So if the DevTools, and the way to get to DevTools is on your browser, right-click, and then click Inspect, and this will pop up, and this is great. If you go at the top left here, you see Toggle Device Toolbar, and so this will allow us to give us the mobile view. We can then develop mobile view first. And so we're going to try and make this look nice. So we've got the styles.css sheet. And one thing I've also added here is the link. We're going to link this file to this, to the actual HTML. And to do that, we do link rel style sheet href. And it's great because in here, if you do link, you can see you got a CSS, and that appears automatically, and I've added the // because we had that issue with the script. So that's it. So that's what I've done off camera. I've also added a couple of elements we'll discuss in a second. So first off, we want to sort out the whole page. We're going to go from big to small. So I want to center everything, and I want to give everything a nice sort of background color and the text color. And so we're going to select everything by selecting the body element. And to select a general tag, we're going to use, just type it in, and then open curly brackets. First thing we're going to do, we're going to make it sans serif. Now, I know a lot of you want to throw up in your mouths, and I apologize, and I also don't at the same time. So I'm going to save this, and as you can see, it hasn't changed because we need to refresh the page, and now we get the sans serif. Great. So we're going to give it a background color. Now you can just write in the color. So blue, for example. And if I do this, you get this. But it's very sort of violent. It's very bright. So instead, I'm going to use the red, green, blue, the RGB, which is 3 values between 0 and 255, red, green, and blue. But I'm also going to add another value, which is the opacity, 0.6. Save, and now if we refresh, it's a little nicer on the eyes. Next, I need to center everything. So I'm going to do this using a bit of a cheat way. I'm going to do something called the flex model. So I'm going to do display, flex, and so everything will use the flex model display. So we're going to do flex direction so that everything is displayed in a column, which means one on top of each other. And we are going to justify content center and align content center. So now everything should be centered both vertically and horizontally. So let's refresh that, and we're almost there. Save. Let's introduce classes, and I've added all these classes to the document, so we'll go through it first. I could just select H1 and then do stuff here. However, selecting elements as a rule of thumb is not great. It's possible, but it's not ideal unless you know that it applies for the entire document and in some very specific circumstances. So instead, you can use classes. And classes are great because they can be applied to multiple elements, and all the elements with said class will have these CSS traits added to them. And in this case, I've added a title one to our title. The way to select a class is to use a period. So dot title, curly brackets. And now we're going to do a couple of things. First of all, we're going to give it something called a margin. And then second of all, we're going to align the text to the center. So let's discuss some of these values. So center, cool. So first off, 1 rem is equivalent to 16 pixels by default. You can change that. But all I'm doing is I'm creating some sort of spacing around the text of 16 pixels. And I'm also aligning the text to the center. So now if we do this, we should have this. Perfect. Now, if I click on this here, I can just find an element and click on it. And you can see these boxes appear around it. And that's the box model, which is this right here. So in the box model, you have the element itself. Then you have something called padding. Padding is an area between the element and its border. So here you can see you got the padding around the coin flip, sorry, the margin rather, because that is the next point after margin. Border is the margin. The margin is the space between the border and the next element. Cool. Next, I've done the same thing for the subtitle. So let's go ahead and do subtitle. And we are going to do similar things. We're going to give it a font size. We're going to change its font size to 1 rem. We are going to, so just making it a bit smaller. The reason we're using rems instead of pixels is because it actually updates with the size of the page a little bit. So it's with the size of the screen and the page and the display, etc. So again, we are going to text align, center it, and we're also going to give it a margin of 1 rem. So now we should have a total spacing of 2 rems between those two. And that's perfect. It's looking pretty damn good. Next, I've added a class of body text to the main text. So body text. And here, nothing special. What we're going to do is we're going to add some spacing between the lines because it's very squished, right? So let's give it some spacing. So the way to do that, we're going to change the line height. And I want to make it 1.5. Now, if I refresh this, that's excellent. Now, you can see I actually forgot to do something quite important, is I forgot to give the text a better color because that doesn't look great. It's also not great for accessibility. It's difficult to see a dark color over another dark color. So we're going to add this color called corn silk that I found that I really like. A good design rule of thumb is to try and use colors close to white that aren't white. And there you go, that's looking nicer. Cool. Continuing on our thing, we are now going to select the list. So again, typically we should give it a class, but just again to show you that you don't need to, I'm going to do it just like this. Not best practice, I should be giving it a class. I'm going to do a couple of things. I'm going to give it a background color, right? So, and I'm going to use black. Really, we should use something close to black, but not quite black, another shade. And so that's cool. But I also want it to have rounded corners. So let's go ahead and give it some rounded corners. So 10 pixels. So we do border radius 10 pixels, refresh, and there you go. Nice. Next, we're going to give the list element some styling as well. As you can see, not ideal, so let's fix it with something called padding. Remember the box model? We had the padding, which is the area between the border and the element itself. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to use this 0.5 rem and 1 rem. Now this looks slightly different, doesn't it? Now not to worry, all it's doing, it's vertical and lateral. So this is the padding above and below, and this is the padding around it. And so now when we refresh it, it's looking a bit nicer. Great. So next step is we are going to look at these. These are divs, right, for divisions. And basically we're creating different areas using divs. And they have no semantic significance, but they help with styling and they help with visualizing the thing a bit better. So I have grouped the coin and the flip button together in a coin flip class. But I've also put the key value of coin into its own div and moved the ID. It doesn't really matter for the ID. In general, what I could have done is I could have left the ID in the P and then done a class in the div, which would have been better semantically. But I wanted to show you that you can select IDs, although it's not ideal, it's not encouraged. You can select IDs by using the hash. So if I go coin, let's start with the coin flip. So dot coin flip, and then just to demonstrate that we can select by ID, we do hash coin, and then we can select that one here this way. So let's start with coin flip. We're gonna center everything, and I'm just gonna copy this from the top. And again, it's a lazy way. There are better ways to do it with less code, but hey, this works. I like flex, so that's great. And now we're gonna focus on coin, and this is a little bit of a long one, but bear with me. Let's quickly refresh this. Interesting. Coin flip. That's because that's a lowercase f. So coin is this right here. It's just some text, so let's give it a bit more oomph. Here goes. First of all, we're going to give it a width of 70% because right now it's spreading across the whole thing. We're going to give it a maximum width though because we don't want it to be too big with a larger screen. So I'll give it 300 pixels. By the way, I'm not just guessing here, this is stuff I experimented with before this video. So 5.5 rem. So minimum height 5.5 rem, and what that'll do is when I refresh this, it will stop the button from jumping up and down when we click this. And we'll fix this issue in a second, not to worry. Next, we're going to give it a nice background color. Now, I think of coins, I think of gold. So, what we're going to do is we're going to give it a color of gold. Great. And we're going to give the text a black color because the yellow, it won't contrast very well with the white. You know, we don't want dark on dark, and don't want light on light. We're going to make it bigger font size, right? Because it's important. So let's make it bigger. Let's give rems values of rem. Go ahead and give it a border radius. Let's round up that corner. So border radius of 10 pixels again, because it's a decent value, works well. Great. And we will again steal this. Not ideal, but it works, so let's do it. Cool. So at this point, I fixed that mini issue with the centering, and we have centered the text inside the button. So let's go ahead and focus on the next point, which is the flip. And we're very, very close, guys. We're going to pad it, and we're going to do something a little different. In fact, something we did with the list, right? So here you go. We got the vertical and the horizontal. We're going to give it a background color. We're going to make that color purple. I'm just going to select purple like this. we are going to give it a border radius. So let's give it 10 pixels. Nice rounded corners are nice. Color, we will give it a color of corn silk. Because it's a button, so it doesn't have that general application to it from the body. And we're going to make it true rem to make it important. And that's great. Now, let's refresh this. And that's looking awesome. There you go. Yeah. Fantastic. So that's great and all, but there's no feedback to the user when you're hovering over it, like to let the user know that this is something that does something. So let's do that. So if I close this, go here, hash it, flip, hover, and this is the way to do it. So we give a semicolon and a hover, and now whatever we do in here will apply to the button only when the cursor's hovering over it. So the first thing we're going to do, we're going to turn the cursor into a pointer. Let's do something extra. We'll turn the background into a different color. We'll make it crimson. And now, check this out. When we refresh this, yeah, see, now that's telling the user who's using it on the computer that this does something. Brilliant. Finally, we are going to add, you can see I've added a class of link to the anchor tag. So I'm going to go ahead and select it directly, and I'm going to do a few things. First of all, I'm going to do something called text decoration to none. If you look here, you see it's purple with the underline. That's not great. So now with the text decoration none, gets rid of the underline. Purple's still there though, so let's go ahead and change the color to the default color that we're using on the website. So corn silk. That's great. Next, we're going to do a font, weight. We'll make it bold, and we'll give it some margin. We'll do 3 rem vertically and auto left and right. Let's see, so let's refresh this, and now it's in the middle, it's thick, and it's white. That's fantastic. And if you look on the mobile, which is what we care about, that's great. We have completed our app, website, whatever you want to call it. Well done. Now you want to show this off to your friends and families. Why wouldn't you? This thing is awesome. So let's go ahead and do that. Now, GitHub. We're not going to cover Git, how to do the command line and that kind of stuff. We're going to create a repository together, and we're going to host this so that you can actually share it with people. Create a GitHub account. It takes 2 seconds. Then you're going to go to the top where it says the plus, and you're going to create a new repository. And we're going to call it, let's see, coin flip app, okay? I'm going to make it private because I'm not particularly interested in sharing this, but you can make it public so people can see your code. And it's good practice to have a README file, so I haven't added one. Don't worry too much about it. We'll just create it. It's going to be an empty README file. And now we've created a repository, and right now all it has is a README file. We're now going to add some files. So upload files, and then we're going to grab our files from here. So if I do this, we're going to grab these 3 files, the index, the script, the style. I'm going to make sure I save everything first. So save, save, and save. And then we're going to drag and drop. And now that's on the internet, safe for you to use. So we're going to commit changes. Very important to commit these changes. So now we've got in our repository, we've got the README file, which we should fill at some point. We've got the index, the script, and the style. Great. We're going to go to settings. And then at the bottom, you're going to have GitHub pages. And you're going to select a source of main, and you are going to save. Scroll back down. And here, you're going to see your site is ready to be published at merryface.co, etc. Which is great. So let's click on here and give it a few minutes. And in a minute, it's going to be published. And there you go. Your site is now publicly available. You can inspect it, you can see that it's working just as it would. Isn't that fantastic? Refresh, and it's still there. Congratulations, you've created your app. So let's go through this again, because what you've done is actually quite incredible. Well done. You created a HTML document where you added all the text content. You then wrote a script, so you did some programming. You told the computer what to do, and it's followed your instructions. You made the computer create random numbers and generate text. The next thing you did is you went ahead and you styled. You gave it some pizzazz. And finally, you created a GitHub account where you were able to publish it so that it's now available to the public, so people can actually see your website and show them, and you can show them your awesome Heads or Tails app. Congratulations, guys. There were some bumps on the road, but together, you and I, we did it. We solved it, we built it, and now you have your first website. And it's time to go out and learn. There are loads of really cool resources to learn. Codecademy is awesome. You got free Codecamp. And another one is going to be here, hopefully, where I'm going to make some small tutorials to help you create cool stuff. I'm Tarek Merriface from Original Coding Name. See you guys next time, and happy coding.